show dedicated to you, to local business, and all of us together. Local 1290. Have something to share? Punch in at 402-342-1290. Here's Neil Nelkin.
Hour 2, Local 1290, brought to you by Retire Smart on News Talk 1290 KOIL. Thank you for joining us. Our number 402-342-1290. And yes, we do have a toll-free number. It's a vestige of an earlier time, but some people still use it. It's 1-877, make that 577, 1-800-577-1290. It's been so long since I used it, I couldn't remember it. 1-800-577-1290. That is the toll-free number. If you're out there on a landline phone, we'll eat the long-distance charges. I tell people about long-distance charges here in the building, and the young people in the building look at me and say, what is that? What is a long-distance charge? I have no idea what I'm talking about, but those are the times in which we live. The election continues. We don't know who's going to win this thing, although both sides are claiming, the Biden campaign is claiming victory. They have the office of the president-elect, which is really not an office, but there's signs everywhere that say the office of the president-elect. The Trump people are saying, not so fast, my friend. We're going to have legal challenges. The courts are now saying, maybe not legal challenges, depends. We're in the midst of all this, and we're going to find out why Nebraska has it figured out so well that nobody's challenging what we've done in Nebraska. It's all other places. Westin Miller of Civic, Nebraska, the director of public policy there. Maybe you can explain some of this to us. Westin, good morning.
Good morning, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, why is it that we have it right and everybody else has it so wrong?
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of factors in Nebraska that allow our elections to be run really well and not get scrutinized, which I'm certainly, thankful for. Some of this political stuff can get pretty nasty. I think it starts with, as kind of a baseline, Nebraska is really lucky to have some election officials that are just extraordinarily good at their jobs. We've got at the state and the county level folks who just are totally dedicated to having high turnout, having safe elections, and making sure the public understands the process. Now, I would have to assume that's the case in most every state, too, so certainly there's more to it than that.
I'm sure there is, and we won't get into the politics behind some of this, but we do it right here. Civic Nebraska, before we get too far down the road, can you define what the organization is, how it's structured, and what it is you do?
Absolutely. So Civic Nebraska is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Our mission statement is that we're committed to creating a more modern and robust democracy for all Nebraskans. And that kind of takes on three major forms for us. The first form actually is one that I'm not directly involved in, but I get to admire from afar. We do work in after-school programs that's dedicated to youth civic leadership. So we have schools in Omaha and Lincoln and actually throughout the state now that are committed to kind of instilling some of those just strong leadership behaviors in our students throughout the state. We've got a civic health program that's focused on everything from building healthy neighborhood associations to getting folks in greater Nebraska connected to the politics in Lincoln. And then I'm mostly involved with our policy, our voting rights side. So we work directly with the legislature and city councils to make sure that our elections are running as well as they can.
I look back on elections from my earlier days of voting. And I remember, it was very simple. You'd go in, you'd fill out a ballot, usually with one of those number 2 pencils with the special lead in it or whatever. You'd put it into the box. Somebody would come around at the end of the day, collect it. They'd count them up, and we'd have a total. Now that everything is digital, now that everything is trackable, now that we've made everything so technologically advanced, have we improved the system or have we destroyed it?
Good question. So I think that something that I'm very proud of in Nebraska and in a lot of states is that, well, yes, there's a lot of new technology surrounding elections. It's really important that people know that ballots are still only done on paper, and they're still counted and they're still audited. So yes, we have online voter registration. Yes, we have great tools that I think are really useful, like in other states have, ballot tracking, which is something I'd love to see in Nebraska. But at the end of the day, we still have paper ballots that are counted by machines that can be verified by hand. So the core of the system is still, very, very safe.
And very simple, ultimately.
That's right.
Westin Miller, Director of Public Policy for Civic, Nebraska. With regard to the technology, now, we have a company here in Omaha that has been directly involved in the innovation of technology for voting, and that's ESS, Election Systems and Software. Born here, still runs here, and runs a lot of the software at elections around the country. And there's been no indication anywhere that ESS systems have been challenged or problematic. But there are other systems manufactured or designed by other companies that have consistently come up in some of these questions. Who oversees these systems and the software?
Great question. So, yeah, I have nothing but respect for the ES&S folks. They provide a number of election technology solutions. Nebraska uses them mostly for their counting machines, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth pointing out that, I won't pretend to know, like, the technical differences between, like, an ES&S and a Dominion and the things like that. But the controversy that happens is often very much about the states where those companies happen to work, not necessarily even the products themselves. But you bring up a great point about, who supervises those systems and those technologies. So every state has their own their set of rules for how they oversee technological security, how they do, audits and recounts and things like that. So the election companies do have a fair amount of autonomy when it comes to creating their election technology, but it really comes up to the states to say, what processes are we going to have in place for keeping our digital technology safe? What's our process going to be for auditing in case there is a discrepancy? What technology are we going to implement to, keep track of our mail-in ballots, things like that? So good, safe elections definitely require, some strong cooperation between the states and those companies.
Do you think we'd be better off having one single federal voter counting tabulation system with one consistent software overseen by some sort of federal agency as opposed to each state doing it their own way?
Sure, that's a big question. And I think it's a question we've kind of been tackling since 1776. I think that in general, I will say that would require such a massive change in how we run elections that it's almost impossible to think about at this point. Our elections are just designed to be operated by the states. Now, that's not, impervious to change, but I think that there is a reasonable amount of consistency right now. I mean, that's really the role of the Department of Justice in a lot of ways, is to make sure that while each state is exercising their right to run their local elections, there are obviously certain baseline requirements we have to follow. It's not so different from how, the federal government has basic rules about, you can't discriminate against these certain groups of people for who has the right to vote. And within that, states are allowed to continue to kind of improve upon that baseline.
Not so sure that they've actually improved, but yeah, I can understand what you're saying. Westin Miller, Director of Public Policy for Civic, Nebraska. Maybe the biggest thing that has changed this year, and probably as a direct result of the COVID pandemic, is the number of people that are not voting in person at election sites. And that kind of opens everything up to what they're saying. Were these ballots mailed out to people who requested them? Some states, they did mass mailings based on voter registration lists without requests. Then, of course, there's the whole issue of returning by the cutoff date and time. Did all this open the whole system up to other problems?
So I think it's important to remember that every tool in the election toolbox has unique benefits and unique challenges, and certainly vote by mail is not an exception to that. In general, I am a really strong proponent of high levels of vote by mail and early voting, like we saw in the recent elections in Nebraska. My main reasons for that are that they consistently increase turnout, which at the end of the day is the most important part of an election system. But they're also really, really safe. I mean, the reason you asked at the beginning, why are Nebraska elections not being criticized by a lot of these national political folks. And the reason is we know how to run elections even with high levels of mail-in voting and keep them really, really safe. So when a ballot is mailed and returned, there's a strong signature matching component. We have unique barcodes that make it impossible for somebody to vote twice. I think if we were to implement systems like improved ballot tracking and even online ballot requests, we could really start to set the standard for what it means to run elections that are really safe and really convenient.
One of the things that you said in your piece yesterday in the Omaha World Herald was that you advocate postage-paid response envelopes. Because of COVID, a lot of people don't get out to buy stamps, and very few people actually buy stamps anymore with so much done via online responses to things and people buying things online. I mean, I don't have a supply of postage stamps at home. I'd have to go out to the post office and try to find some. The paid postage return is probably not a bad idea.
I think it would be really useful. I think it would be reflective of a strong sense of customer service coming from the state when it comes to elections. And but like I mentioned, I mean, is this a problem that affects hundreds of thousands of voters? No, because I also don't have stamps in my house. But when it comes to election day, I can go get some because I'm fortunate to have a car and not be quarantined and be mobile and things like that. But when it comes to good election design, we have to realize that that's just not the case for everyone. And it is just indisputable that for this last election and for the primary, we had some voters who had an early ballot, were quarantined in their house, and didn't have stamps. And so I think it is just good policy to make sure that extra barriers like that don't pop up and keep folks from voting. Because at the end of the day, that is one of the strongest, I think, benefits of a vote-by-mail heavy system in the first place, is that you're able to control for unforeseen circumstances. Because nobody plans to not have a stamp. Nobody plans to get called in for a double shift on election day, but those things happen, and so we need to make sure we can plan accordingly.
That's probably a good idea. Businesses have been doing that for years and without any problems, and it doesn't seem to be overly expensive that the county couldn't afford to do a business reply type of a mailing for voter registration and for ballots.
Yeah, and we do it for those ballot request cards, because Nebraska has kind of that two-step system where you got to request the card to then request your ballot. And the postage is paid on that request card, but it's not currently on the ballot. So obviously it would not be cheap, but I think in the long term it would be a really useful step to take.
Do you think we're headed in the direction now of being able to vote via cell phone apps where we're totally away from paper, totally away from the physical contact with the Douglas County Election Commission? You will be able to just get the app on your cell phone, punch a couple of buttons, and there your vote goes to the Election Commission?
Sure. So I think we are a couple decades away still from that being a real conversation, honestly. I think that,
Well, the technology's here now, though, isn't it?
Certainly. It's undeniable that you can, we transfer hundreds or thousands of dollars on our phone and we don't bat an eye in terms of their security.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I do think, though, that there is a key difference between elections and, let's say, banking in that sense, which is that it is much harder to backtrack and undo results if something goes wrong. And that's one of the huge benefits of having paper ballots at every level of elections right now, is the fact that we can do hand recounts, we can do audits, we can go through and verify numbers. I think it's just inevitable that conversation will become more pressing in the future. But as of now, I think there's a lot of steps we can take to make our paper balloting system even more effective and convenient. But I do look forward to that conversation someday. There'll be a lot for all of us to learn about it.
I think it'll come sooner than you estimate because, like you say, we transfer money on the Internet every day via telephones and banking apps. And I don't know about anybody else, but if I need to find out whether a check was cashed, I go online. I got the picture of the check right there and who endorsed it and when it was cashed. There seems to be almost a physical trail there with my banking app.
No, that's a good point. And that honestly is exactly why I'm being such a strong proponent of this new ballot tracking system that I mentioned in the World Herald article. I think that you're absolutely right that people want to be able to go online and just answer a couple basic questions. And when it comes to elections, especially elections with strong vote-by-mail numbers, that fundamental question is, where is my ballot? And then essentially, did my ballot count? And those are questions that should be very easy to answer. And if we can implement a system like many states have done, where USPS technology is integrated into our mail-in ballots, we can get notified when your ballot is mailed to you, when it arrives, when it returns, and most importantly, once it's finally counted. Because, yes, that needs to be as convenient as possible.
Sounds like it's something that should be in the works right now, and I would imagine there's probably some software designer trying to put something like that together right now and subjecting it to the necessary protocols to make sure it's safe and secure. Because I don't worry about the Chinese or the Iranians or the Russians, well, maybe the Russians, impacting my checking account. Maybe I shouldn't worry about them impacting my votes as well.
No, that's a good point. And the technology does exist. I mean, several states have this tracking system I'm talking about. Some cities have, designed it for themselves, but there are a few products that exist and are really, really affordable. I mean, the city of Milwaukee just got a quote for like $7,000 to implement this system for their whole city, which,
wow,
in terms of election technology, is about as cost efficient as it gets. So it's just a matter of getting our Secretary of State's office to commit to, getting behind this technology.
Very good. Westin Miller, Director of Public Policy for Civic, Nebraska. Appreciate your thoughts on these areas, and you and I will be in touch when we can do it via cell phone, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Retired Smart. Local 1290 is live Monday through Friday, 2 hours, 10 to noon, every day, here on News Talk 1290 KOIL. Tune in each week.